Debunk means to expose the falseness or hollowness of a myth, idea, or belief. In this video essay, debunk will mean to expose the hollowness of an idea, which is global warming and climate change. This is just based on my opinion and two documentaries called The Inconvenient Truth 1 and 2. The two movie documentaries are, if any of you recall, Al Gore's documentaries on the crisis of global warming. I also asked ChatGPT why people are afraid of global warming so I could get a better grip of the concept of fear, which will be explored here related to global warming, and here are some of the ideas from there which resonated with me. First, global warming is scary because it is believed that climate change and global warming have an environmental impact, such as with the melting of the ice caps and the rising of the sea level around the world, which in turn could potentially make it so that coastal cities would go underwater and the people that live there would have to relocate more inland, thus creating societal, political, and distribution of resources problems. Such is the case as the documentary movie 2 shows with Florida. We have to remember that fear related to global warming and climate change is a collective and common fear, and anything that is essentially collective is also primitive, irrational, emotional, and impulsive. It is a fear that lives in modern society's unconscious. We have been hammered this idea into our heads so much that we actually believe we are bad people, that we are harming the planet, and that we are responsible for destroying our home. Thus, it becomes crucial to look for eco-friendly solutions to this problem. We need to apply the 3 R's, in other words, reuse, recycle, and reduce. We must take care of the water, cut down on electricity consumption, and recycle as often as we can. It is a moral problem just as much as it is a matter of feeling guilty and feeling fear collectively. And make no mistake to this collectivity, because if you just casually speak to anyone on the street about this, they will assure you with strong conviction that we are in fact destroying the planet and that we need to reduce, reuse, and recycle without having anything else to say beyond that. It is an idea that has been implanted into the collective unconscious so deep, yet so vague and superficially that most people don't know what they are talking about when they talk about global warming and the climate crisis. They just repeat what everybody else says regarding the problem and the solutions. Even though all humans do on Earth is use up the resources that nature has for energy consumption, this becomes a bad thing. We use it and it is bad because we are harming the planet. We become aggressors, offenders, and attackers because we are hurting the planet. That is, we are pieces of shit that are abusing Mother Earth. And plus, the destruction of the planet is also inevitable, so there is really nothing we can do. Yet, there is. It is ultimately a paradoxical issue, but it is also a deep-stilled paranoia that makes everybody think about the inevitable, the destruction of the Earth, the species, and the natural resources. This will not happen in any of our lifetimes. It is a gratuitous fear living rent-free in our heads, minds, and hearts. It is the idea of death, but taken and expanded to the collective level. This is the end we know will come for humanity or our planet, or at least our planet, but we don't know when it will come. The uncertainty of it is overwhelming and obviously leads many to despair, to annoyance, and to hopelessness unnecessarily. This is the problem, but before we continue with the argument, let's continue looking at the reasons why global warming is a fear. Besides the environmental impact, another effect of global warming is obviously over the economy. Now, this can be viewed from 2 different perspectives. The first one is that of business. On this first part, it means having to reduce consumption, hence productivity in factories that are burning coal and using a lot of energy to make their products and provide their services. This will inevitably affect their income and their money. The other perspective of the impact of global warming on the economy is in decreasing living standards around the world, and this can be because of the poor weather conditions as well as the potential damage to industries, infrastructure, and property that crazy weather such as tsunamis, floods, droughts, and hurricanes can have on cities. A counter-argument is made here, and that is that by reducing productivity levels, such as in Africa or India, this will lead to slower economic progress in those countries. In fact, in the documentary number 2, they speak of that when Al Gore tries to convince Indians to reduce, reuse, and recycle, and they say no, because they are not yet developed like the United States, to which they are right, and to which Al Gore explains that those countries are either way getting hit hard by the chaotic changes in the weather, leaving countries like India with a lose-lose. Health is also a concern for people due to the simple fact that air pollution could potentially increase diseases. This fear is evident because, just like smoking, air pollution harms the lungs and the air we breathe becomes dirty. Clean air is a no-brainer, but the argument for air pollution is tied to the greenhouse gases argument, which states that the air is polluted because the rays of the sun stay trapped in the Earth's atmosphere. This means that the carbon that is emitted from factories stays in the atmosphere and doesn't go out into space. There is also the fear of social and political conflicts due to the lack of resources like water and food, which would lead to struggles and potentially all-out wars. Humans are known to be in constant conflict with one another for whatever and many reasons, and global warming and the lack of resources would not be the problem. People fear wars in their countries and the violence that would break out between groups fighting for control of natural resources would have important effects on the people. The lack of resources in itself could lead to starvation, dehydration, disease, and death. This has always been a problem independent of global warming. This brings us, of course, to the uncertainty factor. This factor is based entirely on not knowing exactly what to do or how to improve the crisis, that is, how to solve the climate crisis. There is also the measurement factor, specifically measuring improvement or detriment in non-biased ways. In a world where global warming is constantly present, people fear not knowing what will happen, if their lives are threatened, or if they will have the necessary provisions to survive another day. It is also difficult to predict how and when changes will occur. And if we are talking about the aggressive changes in the weather and the horrible natural disasters, then it is logical to be afraid. Finally, people fear the lack of action regarding global warming. People fear that not enough is being done, which makes people feel helpless and frustrated, many times angry and depressed. People think about the future generations and how they will suffer the consequences of our actions or lack of. People feel anxiety and they worry about their quality of life and the well-being of the planet. The planet is our only home is the chant and the reflexive trademark that makes global warming take full force and positions itself in the midst of our individual unconscious and that of the collective unconscious. It is a topic that is much talked about, with solutions ranging from reduce, reuse, and recycle to going green to eco-friendly means, methods, processes, and results. It makes some people interested in saving the planet, and it makes others not care at all about the issue. Why is it such a complex issue after all? Is it because there is no straightforward answer or solution to the problem? We have already seen that the global warming fear is multi-layered. So if the problem is multi-layered, then the solution also has to be multi-layered. This means that there has to be not just one solution, but many solutions to the many problems that we call global warming. In other words, it is complex, and that makes it an even bigger problem. But who made us aware of this problem? Who has been an advocate for years on this topic? Who has incessantly traveled the world talking about this problem? In the documentary movie from 2006, An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore basically has a TED Talk of almost 2 hours long where he argues with graphs and data that the global warming crisis is real, that climate change is happening, and that we are witnessing alarming and exponential growth of negative impacts on the world, ranging from air pollution to dry lakes to the literal melting of Antarctica. The first argument he makes is kind of interesting, and it is regarding the Earth's atmosphere, that is, the thin ozone layer that covers the Earth. He says that when the sun's rays hit Earth, they bounce off, thus creating infrared radiation and infrared waves. This is the sun's radiation, and it is actually good, according to Al Gore, that they stay on Earth because it warms the planet. But then air pollution from factories causes the greenhouse gases to stay trapped in the atmosphere, and the heat level rises, hence intensifying the greenhouse effect. The problem here for humans, besides the obvious ones for lung and breathing problems, is that too much light can give you cancer and or other such diseases. It is also worth noting the Earth's rotation, and when people say that ice melts or fire burns in certain parts of the world, I now wonder if it is summer or winter, spring or fall there, because then those video clips we see would be manipulated to represent what people with certain interests want them to represent. Another problem is the CO2 levels in the air. Al Gore starts by stating that greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide are the problem. Could we actually be measuring wrong? I wonder how people are measuring these levels and if they are also biased or if they are being reported neutrally. Is it also possible to regulate CO2 levels? Is that really something we can do? What is a normal or preferred CO2 level for the Earth? Because after all, we are talking about toxic air for human beings, so we can assume that any level of something bad is just bad, right? Or no? When Al Gore presents the melting of the ice, a valid question arises, which is, again, what time of the year is this melting happening in? Is the melting being presented when it is summer or spring there? Because in that case, then it would be normal for ice to melt during the usual hot weather of the year. After all, Australians celebrate Christmas by going to the beach and swimming in the hot weather. What is abnormal for some of us doesn't necessarily mean it is wrong or incorrect for others. It just means it happens differently in different times and places on Earth. If you show me a video clip of ice melting somewhere in the world and call it global warming, I'm going to ask you if it was summer or winter, because that is a factor that obvious environmentalists wouldn't want to state or know. There is an argument which Al Gore makes, and that is that the overall temperature of the Earth is rising. I would ask again, how is this being measured? Because it seems like it is rising at an alarming and exponential rate. According to Al Gore and scientists, this causes the oceans to get warmer and then hurricanes start like they do most years, but there seems to be more hurricanes now than ever before. And these hurricanes are more aggressive, unpredictable, and damaging. It is crazy to think that global warming is the cause of extreme droughts and extreme flooding at the same time around the world. There seems to be a tendency to just outright blame all of the irregular weather patterns on global warming and climate change. There were a couple moments during the documentaries when I thought, damn, we'll just blame global warming on everything, because Al Gore seemed to blame many things, like the fact that doctors were telling women not to get pregnant because of some disease which had a connection to global warming. There are also lakes that are drying up. He mentions Lake Chad in Africa dried up. Now, how many of these changes that the Earth experiences and has experienced are due to natural causes, and how many of them are due to global warming? How can you calculate objectively if what is happening around the world that is sometimes damaging is our fault or is just nature taking its course? We have a tendency to now blame everything wrong with the natural world on global warming. It is interesting to note that the last ice age happened 11,000 years ago, and that the Earth has gone through various ice ages in its past. Was that due to global warming, or were those ice ages just nature taking its course? There is also this idea that not only works with nature and planet Earth, but also with technological advances, and it is the false idea that things are changing so fast. So fast compared to what? What would things moving slow look like? Or what would things moving at a normal rate and speed look like? Why does it always have to be fast and exponential growth, as if to sound so dramatic? Al Gore also talked about drunk trees, which are these trees in cold areas that are now tilted on their sides due to the snow melting. I thought these trees were kind of cool, but I understand the seriousness of the issue. These trees would normally stand right up if under their normal weather conditions, but because the ice on and around them has melted, they are then not strong enough to support themselves, hence tilting on their sides. The reason the ice caps melt is because the open water of the ocean receives the sun's rays and the sun heats the Earth's water, but the idea is that all of the ice around the world balances itself out with the heat from the sun. So if there are no more ice caps or ice on the world, then the world will only be exposed and hot thanks to the sun. There is also an idea that there are fewer days of frost and that it is now hotter, even though I feel like it has been colder now than say 15 or 20 years ago. This could be because weather is acting differently in different parts of the world, right? Therefore, the term then should not be global warming, because if in many places it is in fact getting colder and not hotter, then it should simply be referred to as climate change. How would the environmentalists explain that in some areas it is now colder than before? Why is it called global warming if it is not getting warmer in general in some places? In Antarctica, there seems to be pools due to the melting, but what happens after the ice melts? Does it refreeze again? Because if it is summer or spring in those regions, then it's understandable that some areas would melt, but then does it freeze back up in fall and winter? Why don't we know this? Why is this not generally known? Global warming is the common modern-day boogeyman. It is exactly what mythology and ancient ghost stories would do to the primitives, like when they believed that the sun was a god. It is limited knowledge, and not only that, it is acting as if the limited knowledge we have is all there is, and then we must act now or otherwise, based only on that scientific knowledge. It is impulsive and disorganized. We are still very much primitive, and now we have a new religion called science and new gods called facts, data, and graphs, even though we all know deep down that facts, data, and graphs can still be manipulated to represent people's best interests. The subjective disguised as the objective. And we must now feed the new gods sacrifices as did the ancients. People will cast me out for saying this, but if you really think about it, everything we know about the universe and life is just our human suppositions. We have no real way of verifying if we are right or wrong. No god or superior being to tell us, yes, that is correct. That is not to say that I do not believe in anything, because we still must believe in things for our sanity, otherwise we fall into despair and go insane. But we must also know that everything everybody says about anything is mere conjecture. Al Gore has no real way of proving that global warming is real, nor can he predict the future. He is just like you and me, and so is his team of scientists and experts. We are all the same at the end of the day. People thinking and making things up to try to explain this world based on our own terms. Al Gore is an author of fear. I can agree with him and meet him halfway when he speaks of new ways of working the land, new methods, new solutions. That is, the potential to go about doing things. Humans tend to be ineffective and inefficient at the moment of planning and carrying out projects. And it is because planning and executing enterprises is no small feat. It requires many people, vision, and consideration for as many unpredictable and unforeseen factors as possible. It is a big responsibility, and it is hard to do. So it could be that the ways we currently do things need to be updated and upgraded. Big business needs to look for new energy sources, new and even more effective processes that could benefit everybody, and take into consideration the big picture of any individual and company actions. This may be the big idea behind the global warming issue. It consists of making everybody responsible for the impact that their actions have, but not just in the here and now, but also long-term and beyond your reach, namely into the future weeks, months, or years, and the impact that your actions have over other places. It makes people conscious and responsible, and that is a good thing. However, the means to achieve this, the fear being instilled, is psychologically damaging to the human mind. It can be argued that humans will only act out of fear and not out of anything else like motivation, love, etc. But to exploit the common myth that we can be potentially destroyed at the end is an old idea. Let's just think back recently to 1999 or 2012. Humanity always seems to imagine its inevitable and somewhat dramatic apocalyptic destruction, and this idea again is like imagining death on a global scale all the time while you live your life. It is like acting as if nothing you do in your life matters, because in the end you will die, and not to mention that you will try to limit yourself as well as your resource consumption and get angry at people for not taking care of the planet. And however true it is that destruction is unavoidable in the end, it shouldn't hang over us like a shadow which constantly reminds us of it. What about the damage that global warming does to our mental and emotional health? What about the fear of fearing global warming? Where does that get us? To change and save the planet? Do we choose nature or our need for resources and our well-being? Do we choose the planet or the economy? What are the positive and negative consequences of choosing one thing over the other? Some may think that through exploitation of the planet's resources, we may find the solution to global warming. Others think that we should stop consumption and exploitation to reduce global warming. It is a paradox because how can we find a solution if eco-friendly regulation tells us not to use or waste or consume? What is the impact of choosing economy over the planet or vice versa? And how can this be evaluated long term? It is a puzzle. Is it even treatable? Is it a problem that has a solution? Or is it just like one of those philosophical questions that has no answer? Is the global warming issue only destined to be reflective and contemplative while it corrodes our mental and emotional health with fear? And how do we know that if we choose resources over our well-being or vice versa, we choose correctly? It can be argued that fear is the first of the emotions. It is manifested in all animals and strangers. Cautiousness, expectancy, and aware of potential threats, alert. Global warming makes us feel these primitive emotions in the here and now. This is wrong. If global warming is true, then it is a future problem, and that is a fact. Most people are not currently affected by it, or at least its consequences are not felt by most people around the world. If this were the case, then everybody would be doing something about it, but no one is because most people do not see it as a real threat. It is funny because yet most people will say it is a problem, but then do nothing about it. They just go on with their life as usual. Could it be that the choice between nature and wealth is a false choice on the horns of a dilemma, especially when we limit our options to these two very broad ideas of it's either the world or us? Al Gore seems to be talking to the general public, and his ideas have spread out immensely over the last 2 decades. Why? Why is he talking to the general public and not to businessmen? I understand that he is trying to get public support, but he should be lobbying. He should have become president and done something about it. If global warming is real, then the real changes to be made are in the industrial processes, or maybe is the reason why he is talking to the general public is to get them against the businessmen? The worry seems to be the future as well as the people now. Al Gore talks about very bad things, and you can almost imagine the scenarios he paints as if they were movie pitches for an end-of-the-world film. But he also assures us that although people go from denial to frustration when accepting global warming, there is hope. That is, even though fear is instilled, which is the threat of real or imaginary danger, there is a solution. It is curable, this disease. Now, moving on to the Inconvenient Truth Part 2, which was actually done about 10 years after the first part. It seems to also be a form of TED Talk, but with a lot more video clips ranging from Al Gore's trips to Florida and India. It is a little bit more dynamic than the first one, with only relevant exposition in the form of a TED Talk presentation here and there. From the beginning, Al Gore states that he feels strongly about this. Feels. And again, this is the problem with this logic. It is an emotional problem. I have seen people mad because it is daylight out and the room lights are on. They turn off the lights all mad and say, we have to save the planet and conserve energy. People that are all for saving the planet are usually angry, and they will attack you if you are not complying with their saving the planet motto. For them, there is little or no tolerance at all for lights on when it's daylight or leaving the water running for a little too long. Al Gore then goes on to explaining the ice caps melting again as he did in the first part. So the argument here is that when the ice caps melt, the sea level rises and coastal cities become flooded. Now, ChatGPT states that the impact of the melting of the ice caps is mostly negative. However, there is a pro here, which is increased access for shipping and resource extraction. What does that mean? Maybe that some businesses will benefit from the melting of the ice caps, but at the end of the day, the negative reasoning will win because we are damaging the planet somehow. Here, once again, I dare say that the global warming idea is really a movement to try to overthrow big business because it does affect them more than any other societal sector. There is a moment when Al Gore goes to Florida and it is flooded. Here, I say once again, does this type of thing happen year-round? How often is it for coastal cities to get flooded independent from global warming? And how is scaring the general public going to do more than get people angry when you leave the lights on or the water running for too long? In this second part, it can be seen that third world countries or emerging economies like India would rather burn coal and fossil fuels than starve. They mention many times that the United States has done it for 150 years, and now that developing nations are doing it, it's wrong. It's damaging the planet. Doesn't it seem convenient that after the United States has become a global superpower, now other nations, that is competition, cannot pursue the same goal? Plus, where do we get this idea that humans can do so much to such a big planet like Earth? They say that we are a lot of people on the planet and that overpopulation is a real problem nowadays. But all it takes is a look at a density population map of the world to see that the whole planet is basically empty. People are mainly grouped together in specific areas, but countries like the United States and Russia are practically empty. The problem with the population problem is a concentration problem, not an overpopulation one. Humans concentrate themselves all into big cities and then see a lot of people everywhere and think that the planet is overpopulated. Come on. Al Gore seems to also use hurricanes and overall natural disasters and deaths as his pathos or emotional argument. Could it really be that global warming is causing these natural disasters? Or could it be instead that these natural disasters are inevitable and occur whether we pollute or not? People need energy and humans consume it. People do not need to feel guilty or like they are pieces of shit because they are using up resources. For example, people will waste hours scrolling through social media, watching movies and TV shows, using up energy in stupid ways, and then those same people will get angry because someone forgets to turn off the lights. Are you kidding me? Do they feel perfect or morally superior to say something? The hypocrisy, the incongruence. Al Gore literally goes to India to speak to representatives about cutting down their consumption, and they say, hell no, the US got to do it for 150 years. Why can't we, they say. Besides, it wouldn't be fair for developing countries. Could it be that the United States, being a first world economy and having this first world country problem, tells other nations to stop consuming, to stop them from developing? Why meddle in other countries like that? If a country wants to be renewable, let them be. If a country wants to burn coal and fossil fuels, well, let them be. Portugal, for example, just recently ran for 6 days straight from October 31st to November 6th, 2023 on renewable energy. I mean, if it can be done, go ahead, but don't pressure people, that's all I'm saying. Everyone is free to choose what to do regarding a problem that is fabricated based on selected evidence of the planet, nature, and the irregular weather patterns. It is like when the local news and townspeople report the increase of crime in the area, and then everybody gets scared to go out at night and is more careful. Among other things, it instills fear and panic in the minds of the townspeople. Now, I know that ad hominem arguments are fallacious and out of character, and we should always separate the man from the work. But I was just curious and wondered how much money Al Gore had and Googled his net worth. The man has $300 million. From doing what? It seems fishy that someone who is a strong and fierce global warming advocate has so much money when it is not apparent what he has done to get it. The Rock, for example, has a net worth of $600 million, but he is a movie star, he has his own tequila, he is one of the most famous and celebrated WWE wrestlers of all time. I mean, the man has earned his money, but what has Al Gore done for his? Well, back to the arguments. We can see that a change in the methods and the processes could be something worthwhile and maybe even beneficial for people like businessmen. Creating new solutions thanks to the global warming problem. It is a method of production change. Kind of like Henry Ford revolutionized the assembly line production techniques in the past. We need a Henry Ford that can find green solutions so that both environmentalists and businessmen can be happy. It is funny, however, that the United States wants countries like India to jump on over to green solutions when effective ones have not yet been created. And those countries like India say no because it is not fair that the US was able to burn coal and fossil fuels for 150 years and now they don't want other countries to do it. Could it be that the US wants to stunt growth in developing countries? Could it be that instead of trying to delay global warming and the climate crisis, people are actually trying to delay developing countries from becoming global superpowers? Could it be that what is really trying to be delayed is competition? Could it be that the climate crisis is actually a conspiracy to stop mass production, seeing that the gases emitted by factories keep the ozone layer warmer and the weather patterns irregular? What would be the effects of controlling or even stopping global warming? Is this possible? What type of social, economic, or ideological impacts would it have? Remember, people say, look at the effects of people's actions. Look at what it causes, and you'll have their motives. That is the reasons why they did or are doing things in the first place. What would happen if we substituted all gas emission technology for one that doesn't do that? Would the environmentalists be happy? Or is the intention to run down big business and big corporation? There is an idea which could lead to a potential solution and where all sides could be happy, which actually involves circular reasoning. There has to be a way to make all processes close in on themselves, kind of like what happens with recycling, where what is used and discarded then is retransformed into something for new use and discarding. The problem with recycling is that it still takes consumption of materials and energy to retransform recyclable material, and the processes of this marginal material and energy also has to be circular and recyclable. In other words, the materials and processes it takes to make certain things circular and recyclable is still a problem because those materials and processes are not circular and recyclable. It is like the collateral damage idea. You solve one problem but create 2 or 3 more. There is a term called Pharisaism, or this righteous and hypocritical view on life's morals. Many environmentalists obviously take this moral stance with regards to global warming and people's responsible or not usage of this energy consumption and resources. This idea that everything you're doing as a human being is bad because you are damaging the planet is outrageous, and it actually damages people's psychology. It makes people think that we are responsible for something that is not only business bigger than us, but planetary bigger than us. We give ourselves too much credit for things that happen to the planet when in reality our impact could be not as great as we assume it is. We are, after all, a speck compared to the vast immensity of the universe out there. Now, if we were to tackle the serious issue of how to measure improvement, we would have to leave out all types of biases, but cross-reference many studies from different types of institutions and people. This requires a lot of work, money, and time. Not to mention that the organization in charge of this would need to have no party affiliation or conflict of interest, which in today's globalized world is hard not to do. Tobacco companies, for example, are known for doctoring experiments and scientific reports and only showing evidence that benefits their outlook on cigarettes, which is that they are not so harmful. And even then, whether global warming is real or imaginary, it is a fear that people have in their minds and hearts now. It is a common day modern phobia. How do we cure this disease? How do we make it so that people feel safe again? How do we make it so that people do not blame others and themselves for the irregular weather patterns ever again? Is this even possible now, or will it be that people will just forget about it with time, as it happens with everything else in history? Or are we now destined to hold each other accountable for forgetting to turn off the lights? Fear throughout history has always been an effective way to get people to do what you want, that is, to control them. Religions did it in the past, as did primitive cultures with mythical creatures and ghost stories. Maybe the narrators didn't know the whole story, or they didn't have all of the information, and they were faced with limited knowledge, such as seeing a big ball of fire in the sky, then on occasions witnessed rain, lightning, and thunder, and inferred that that big ball of fire in the sky was angry, so it needed human sacrifices. In the era of science and data, we see this pattern being repeated, but now in terms of science and data. People telling us that we are damaging the planet because the data and the scientists show it. That is, because the new deities and the new gods say so. Global warming is a fear, and science is the new religion on which global warming is founded and erected on. A scientific dogma with no room for tolerance or alternate points of views, with the reasoning that it is objective and observable as well as experimental and repeatable. A dogma where doctors and scientists are now the new wizards, wise old men, kings, and sages of the past, where their word is law. Everything can be explained, reducible, and reductionist to mere observed phenomena, tangible and sensory only. This is known, and it has been said many times, but fear specifically means control. Why do you want to control? What is your reasoning for controlling others? Is it to save the planet or for the kids in the future? How can someone who wants to do good for the world use fear as a means to get it? Don't they see that the means is wrong and immoral? Instilling fear, regardless of whether climate change is real or not, is not the way to go about it. Instilling fear in others demoralizes people. It makes them negative, hopeless, and frustrated. It makes them angry and aggressive at humanity. Plus, why would you talk about a problem publicly if you don't have a solution for it? Al Gore speaks of the alarming rising data on global warming with all of its complementary and collateral consequences like human diseases, economic burden, and natural disasters. Hell, at more than one point of the documentaries, I thought this guy just speaks of problems and then blames it all on global warming. You can literally blame anything on global warming. Your money problems? Global warming. You fought with your spouse? Global warming. You don't have friends? Global warming. Your YouTube channel has no views? Global warming, lol. Finally, for the argument that the weather is now bad, I ask, has the weather ever been regular or good? What would the weather being regular look like? Is there even such a thing? We used to have the regular spring, summer, fall, and winter order back like 15 or 20 years ago, but how was the weather like in the 50s, last century, or last millennium? Once again, it's kind of like when people talk about crime and say that things have gotten worse lately, but for example, in New York City, crime was really bad in the 70s and 80s, then it settled down in the 90s. Recently, crime has gone up again, so it is not a linear going up and crime rising trend. It is more of a, there are moments when it increases and then decreases. It is just funny how nobody notices when bad things go down. They only notice them when they go up. Why is that? I believe weather is the same way. Plus, if global warming is real, then only humans will be destroyed. The earth will regenerate itself and continue existing if we all die. Global warming in reality only affects us, humans, in essence, not the planet. After being exposed to all of this, I know limited information on global warming. I can say that I started out as someone who thought global warming was false, and now I believe that even if it is true, there may be foul play at work with regards to the message, which is layered with fear and sentiment. I also think that regardless of global warming, the way we do things can change and processes can become way more effective and efficient than they are now for everybody. We need more Henry Fords in the world. Nevertheless, I am against using scientific fear to influence and persuade people into taking action. It is known that people do not do things unless it is because of fear. That is, if you incentivize someone or scare them into doing something, it is more likely that they will actually do it if you scare them. But we all know that long term, this is not a sustainable way of doing things. Psychological coercion is not the answer long term. Fear and anger are not sustainable. Global warming does not mean scaring people to get them to take action, and it also doesn't mean taking advantage of people's fears to provoke change. It is not a means of manipulation, and it also doesn't represent doom or inevitable destruction. Global warming could offer us a different way to do things, but beyond that, it is not something to fear, but rather to critically analyze, critically question, and critically decide on. Global warming and the climate crisis are ideas that have been around since the last century. It deals with the weather and the economy and the means and use of production and consumption. It talks about real life things such as provisions and the use of energy, like the electricity we use to power our houses daily. It threatens our survival, literally. This is not to be taken lightly, especially when people are, rather than rational, now emotional when it comes to the topic. With all of this said, I would like to conclude by saying that I do not have enough expertise or knowledge on the topic, nor do I think I ever will, to give an accurate, precise, and well-informed picture and or solution regarding the problem. Whether real or imaginary, it exists inside the collective unconscious now, and my job is simply to inquire and explore. Don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and explore more on Abstracto. If you stayed until the end of the video, thank you. Next video will be about good men turned bad water signs.